It looks like the attendees have stopped joining. Um, it's my pleasure to speak with you all today, and I want to thank you for joining us on today's webinar. My name is Paul Longhurst, and I'm the International Student Advisor here at Trent, and I'm with my colleague Jessica. Say hi.
Hi, everyone. Nice to see you. My name is Jessica Evans, and I'm the International Student Program Assistant. So nice to see everyone.
Yeah. So today's webinar, we're going to be talking about the next steps for new international students. Specifically, we're going to be talking about what the next steps are in relation to immigration and in relation to your options to come to Canada or to study online. I know you have many questions, and that's great. We love questions. You can put them in the chat box and we'll answer them as when we can, but I might suggest waiting until we're later on in the session so that we can speak about what our plan is first and what we know, and then maybe many of your questions will be answered first. So thanks so much. It's nice seeing these introductions in the chat box, and speaking for Jess and myself and all of our colleagues at Trent, we're really excited to meet you online, and we're going to be more excited to meet you in person sometime soon, hopefully. So as we just said, I'm Paul and that's Jess, and today we're going to be talking about a few different things. We'll tell you a little bit about what Trent International is, the office where we work. Maybe the most important topic of the day is going to be the immigration update. I'm a regulated immigration advisor, so my job is to follow immigration policy and to help students stay legal with their immigration status, and to help you plan for getting to Canada and adhering to all of the rules that you have to adhere to. We'll have a period about immigration stuff right after the immigration section. We'll talk a little bit about your health insurance for when you travel to Canada and what it covers and how you can be assured that you have it. Then we'll talk a little bit more about other online sessions that we have, our winter orientation, and then we'll have a conversation with more questions, and we can answer anything else that we didn't address during the session. Rest assured, this session is going to seem a little bit technical and a little bit maybe boring, but I promise you that it's really important. And bear with us. We're going to have more fun opportunities to get to know each other in the future, but today it's the formal, legal, here are your obligations and options about immigration.
So I'll talk a little bit about Trent International and who we are. Trent International is the central support office for all international students at Trent, also English as a second language students, and any folks that want to include a study abroad opportunity within their degree. The one really great thing about Trent University is that we're still quite a small university, so we have a very tight-knit international community, and within that is obviously Trent International. So we hope over time that you'll feel like we're your home away from home. We are located in Champlain College 302. For many of you, that means nothing right now, but eventually when you do get to campus, you will see us in Champlain College. We are open Monday to Friday, 10 a.m. until 2 p.m. in our physical office for anyone that is on this session that wants to come see us in our Peterborough office. But we also have a virtual front desk that operates from 10 a.m. until 4 p.m. EST. And you can also follow us on social media or send us an email if you have any questions. And Trent International provides many different services, and I'll just go through some of them. Paul mentioned he offers immigration advising, but also academic advising as it relates to your immigration status. We also administer health insurance. So the health insurance that international students have is called UHIP, the University Health Insurance Plan. As I mentioned, we have many different study abroad opportunities as well, and an English as a second language program. We offer international scholarships and awards. We also have many different international student-specific workshops and community building events for students. We offer pre-arrival support and orientation and transition support. So We'll get to know you in many different ways, and we offer many different services to support you throughout the time you're here at Trent.
Thanks, Jess. So, as you all know, as international students studying in Canada, you have kind of some specific immigration requirements that you have to adhere to. Um, the federal government department that administers and enforces all of the immigration rules, it's called Immigration, Refugees, and Citizenship Canada. Usually we just call it IRCC because it's much easier to say. IRCC has implemented new immigration requirements for anyone entering Canada right now due to the COVID-19 pandemic. Essentially right now, the border to Canada remains closed to all non-essential travelers. That's the word they use. The good news is that recently, international students were exempted from this requirement. So if you meet all of the eligibility requirements or criteria, which we're going to talk about in the next slide, you are able to enter Canada, which is awesome. So yeah, the rules change frequently about immigration. This information is up to date as of today, but please be aware that, you know, if the global pandemic situation changes or immigration policy changes in accord, you know, we'll try to keep you updated, but always refer to IRCC's website for the most up-to-date info. So right now, if you were to come to Canada, you must have the following points, the following documents. There's no debating. If you were to show up at the border without any of these, you would be denied entry and you'd be put on the next plane back to home. And that would be a real disappointment for everyone involved. So please make sure that you're prepared thoroughly before you make plans to come. First of all, anyone that's coming to Canada right now as an international student has to have been approved for a study permit. You either have to have a valid study permit in your hand, or you need to have been emailed what's called a letter of introduction, which is a formal letter from IRCC saying, congratulations, you've been approved for your study permit. Show this letter to the officer at the border, and they will print you your study permit when you arrive in Toronto or whatever port of entry you come to. So that's key. That's number one. Related, you obviously need a valid passport. You needed a passport to apply for your study permit. You need a passport to travel internationally. So make sure that you have a passport that is valid for a minimum of 6 months past the date you plan on traveling. Ideally, several years would be great. If you have a passport that's good for 5 or 10 years, that would be perfect. Depending where you live in the world, you also need to have a visa or what's called well, actually a visa or TRV are the same thing. The other thing is called an ETA, an electronic travel authorization. A visa or TRV is like a stamp that's put, or a seal that's put into your passport. An ETA is like an electronic code that is just linked to your passport. So most countries have visas. Some countries that Canada has special arrangements with, like the United States, UK, France, Germany, for example, you just need an ETA and not a visa per se. But you do need a visa or an ETA to let you enter the country. That's an entry document. When you travel, you also need to bring proof of enrollment, and that's a letter that proves that you're a Trent student. That could be a couple different things. It could be your admission letter, if it's still valid, if it hasn't expired. But the easiest one to bring is the letter that you should have been emailed, and will be emailed again probably last week, that just verifies that you're a student at Trent University, and it describes, has a date on it, and it describes when, you know, classes are happening and that you're an official student. You also need to bring a detailed quarantine plan. Jess and I are going to talk at length about what that entails, but right now, anyone that enters the country has to quarantine for 14 days. And that means to isolate themselves from other people and to basically stay in your own private room until 14 days has passed to ensure that you don't have any symptoms of COVID-19. And after the 14 days, you're free to kind of move freely around Canada, but during those 14 days, you're required to stick to this quarantine very strictly. And I'm sure you all have cell phones at home. You probably don't have a Canadian number yet, but you can download the Arrive Can app, which is an app the federal government has created to assist with travelers during the time of COVID. on it, you'll upload your quarantine plan to the federal government, and they'll also send you some notifications about checking in, making sure that you're adhering to your quarantine. We'll talk in more detail about this later as well. So many of you probably all of you want to come to Canada, and that's awesome. And we want you to come too. But what I want to tell you right now is that most students actually don't need to come to Canada right now. You may not need to come to Canada in the winter at all. So if you're studying online during winter 2021, the time spent studying will count towards your post-graduation work permit eligibility if you have a valid study permit. This is awesome news because many people are choosing to stay home during the pandemic and waiting for the situation to improve, and will come to Canada either next summer or next September. And this is great because studying online is going to count even if you're outside of Canada. So think about this before you make a decision. For some of you, getting to Canada is really the best plan. For others of you, it may make more sense to stay at home and get a head start on your studies from home. Wait for the situation to improve, save some money on accommodation, and come in the future. So just because you can come to Canada doesn't mean you have to. As it says below that, most of our classes at Trent are being offered online in winter 2021. Some classes will have in-person seminar options, or maybe an in-person lecture or lab, and that's great. But most of these classes also have online options and opportunities. So depending on where you are in the world, and depending on your comfort level with studying in group setting, you can study online or in person. Actually, I should say before I go on any further, I know there are many of you from different levels of study in this group. So some of you are ESL, or English as a Second Language students. That's great. Welcome. Most of you are probably undergraduate students, which means you're doing a bachelor's degree, Bachelor of Arts or Bachelor of Science. And most of the information about courses and time frame that I know most in depth has to do with undergraduate timetable. Some of you are graduate studies, and what I want to tell you is that questions about courses should probably defer to the Faculty of Graduate Studies or your specific program. I know most of your classes are being offered online in winter as well. Some are going to be in person, and just defer to them for the final word on what the schedule is. The academic timetable, I hope most of the undergraduate students that are in the session today have seen. It's the spot where it will tell you what's being offered in person or online. Your best friend is Google always. If you just Google Trent academic timetable, you can find it really quickly. Or if you go into your My Trent portal and click on the register tab at the top of your screen, you can see the academic timetable there and the academic calendar. Somebody asked a question that's a good question. They're asking, what is a mixed delivery model? So you probably saw some messages from Trent saying that we're going to be teaching in the mixed delivery model. Basically, what that means is that we're going to be offering courses both online and in person. We have students, Canadian students or students who are already in Canada, who are international, who want to study in person, and that's great. But for those of you who are outside of the country, you can pick and choose whether you're studying online or in person. I should mention for the graduate studies students who are in the session, your graduate timetable is also online and it is up to date. So just search up Trent graduate student timetable, and you'll be able to find the up-to-date information there. So we can change that slide to the next one, please. So this is a question that somebody asked a minute ago in the chat group, and it has to do with what happens if you don't have a study permit. So basically, if you haven't applied for a study permit, you need to apply for a study permit. You're almost out of time. If you don't get your application in the next week or two, I would say there's almost 0% chance that you're going to have an approved study permit by the start of the winter term. I'm assuming that most of you have already applied. Hopefully, most of you have already received a decision. And for those of you who haven't received a decision, you're probably waiting on your biometrics offices to open or for final approval to be made. So If you haven't applied, do so now. You apply online through the Immigration Canada IRCC website. I'm available if you have specific questions, but it's not that complex. It'll probably take you about an hour of time to do it once you get your documents together. So if you've applied and you're awaiting a decision, you need to have your study permit approved before starting in January. If your application isn't approved before then, you should defer your studies into a future term. Basically, you shouldn't start without having a valid study permit because the time won't count towards your work permit. You may not get approved in the future, and you're required by law to have a study permit to study basically at a Canadian university. If you have questions about deferring your admission, which basically means delaying the start of your studies until a future term, you should email internationaladmissions@trentu.ca if you're an undergraduate or an ESL student, or graduate admissions if you're a grad student, and then we can walk you through what your options are. I see a few of you are messaging and saying the biometrics haven't opened yet in the country. That's common, and I understand the stress about that. You're not going to be able to travel to Canada until your biometrics have been given and a final decision has been made. If you submitted your application earlier in the fall and you received approval in principle, as we called it, stage 1 or stage 2 approval, you can keep studying. That's fine. You just have to do it online from home. So that's good for those of you who have been waiting for a decision and haven't quite received it yet. So that's a bit about the immigration specifics. People are asking specific questions about what are the last dates to get the decisions. I mean, essentially, I would say that you have to have the decision made before the classes start in January, right? So check the academic timetable, basically the first week of January. So if you haven't received the decision by the end of December, you're going to have to consider deferring your start of your studies. A few other questions that came in had to do with approval in principle, and that's great. So basically, if you have the approval in principle, as I said, you can keep studying. Some of you have already deferred a couple times because life sometimes requires a deferment. We understand that right now we're in exceptional times, and we're happy to facilitate deferments for a third or even a fourth time. You just have to let us know. And if you get approval in the middle of the term, next term, it kind of puts you in a difficult situation because if you don't have a study permit yet, you can't come to Canada. And if you register in courses without a study permit, you shouldn't really be studying. So I guess if you get approval and you've been studying online and you have approval in principle before that, you could plan to come to Canada in the middle of the term if you want, but maybe staying home for the winter term would be the best option, and coming at the start of the summer term would make the most sense. I think we're going to go a little more specifically in what happens for those of you who are planning to arrive in Canada. So there's a few steps you have to do. Hopefully all of you received an email from Trent International a week ago, and it was a very long document. We're going to go through it in great detail. I strongly recommend that you read it and then read it twice, because it's really important that you adhere to what is in it. The main things to note that before you get on a plane, you must have no symptoms of COVID-19. You'll be checked at the airport in your home country. They'll do often temperature scan and a symptomatic scan. And if you have any symptoms, a fever, a cough, anything that would count as a COVID-19 symptom, they won't let you board the plane. So make sure you're healthy. If you're booking a flight, maybe pay for cancellation insurance, because having flexibility might be really useful in this time right now. As I mentioned, you're also required to quarantine for 14 days when you get to Canada. You're going to have to explain your quarantine plan to the border agent when you get to Canada and to the airline before you get on the plane. So you have to have a clear plan, and you should have it written down, and we're going to give you a guide to writing your plan that you can do on your own before you plan to leave. You're also going to have to register your plan in Trent University's quarantine registry. There was a link to the registry in the document you were sent, and we'll look at it together again in a few minutes. what we're going to do is we're going to just quickly, we're going to keep a record of all your quarantine plans because we have to report to the government that you're complying with them. We're going to check in with you while you're in quarantine to make sure that you're still in quarantine, that you're doing well. And when we review them, if there's any, omissions or errors in your plan, we'll liaise with you to make sure that your plan is comprehensive and clear. And then number 5, last but not really last, there's other things. You must register with the ArriveCan app, as I said, so that the government has a record of your quarantine registry as well. The final note is really important. So we're here to help you. I'm happy to talk with you, or Jess is, or our other colleagues, to make sure that your plan is good and that your arrival to Canada is supported. But your immigration plan is your responsibility. Just like your study permit, just like your passport, it's your responsibility to research what the rules are, to follow them, and to make sure that you explain your adherence to them to the border agent.
All right, so what we're going to do now is to go through step by step some of the different documents you need to go through to prepare for arrival in Canada. So as Paul mentioned, an email did go out to admitted international students outlining your next steps for arrival in Canada last week. We will continue as students are admitted to resend this email, but you can also find all of this information on the website, and I will share that link with everyone so that you're aware of where to find this information if you don't have this email. So don't stress if you haven't received this yet. So the email looked a little something like this. And it includes the Trent University quarantine registry, where you will upload your final quarantine plan, the safe arrival protocol, which is essentially the protocol by Trent University that also outlines the requirements of the Canadian government and what you need to do to arrive safely in Canada. It also includes a quarantine plan supplement and a template. So if you're wondering what to include in your actual quarantine plan, this will help guide you in making your own. And lastly, the email, attached to the email is a letter of support from Trent University, just stating that we will have a mixed delivery model, and we support students to either return or enter Canada for their studies. And I know folks are asking if we can resend this email. Yes, of course. We keep pulling lists periodically and sending out the email. So we'll make sure, if you're newly admitted, we'll make sure that you get the email as well.
Jess, can I add a comment about that?
Sure.
So if you're a new student, maybe you're not in the habit of checking your Trent email yet. It's a really good idea to log into your My Trent portal and find the email icon at the bottom of the screen and make sure that you're checking your Trent email regularly, because that's where we're going to be sending all of our official communication, and this information will be in there.
Great. So the next thing I wanted to talk about is the letter of support. As I mentioned, this is attached to the email you would have received explaining your next steps. And in this email, like I mentioned, this email is a letter of support, just saying that Trent University is offering a mixed delivery model of classes, and we support you entering Canada. So what you should do with this letter is print it out, and you will present it to the Canadian Border Service officer along with your quarantine plan. So just some things to note about the letter itself. It will include your full name and also your student number. So if for some reason, because we have had some students reaching out to us mentioning that their name, their official name isn't spelt correctly, please reach out to us and we can make those corrections on our end. So the next really important document that you need to refer to, you need to download, read, understand, is the Trent Safe Arrival Protocol. So this outlines how Trent students can safely enter Canada for the purpose of studies. As I mentioned, you can find the Trent Safe Arrival Protocol on our website. It's under Current Students, International Immigration, Trent Safe Arrival Protocol. But if you just open up the Trent website, go into the search bar and look up Trent Safe Arrival Protocol, you can find it there as well. So I'm going to pass it over to Paul, and Paul is going to go through some of the important pieces in the Trent Safe Arrival Protocol.
Okay, so hopefully you can see my screen now. This is the actual Safe Arrival Protocol as found on our website that Jess just mentioned. It's a big document, and we're gonna update it as changes are made. So it's current as of November 3rd, and there's been no changes made since that date. Basically, this is a guide, as Jess said, to keeping you safe when you enter Canada, and to keep the Canadian population safe as well, because we don't want to have any new introductions of COVID-19. I'm going to go through it in a fair amount of detail. Basically, as I said earlier, any international student with a study permit can enter Canada, provided they're studying at an approved school, which Trent is. Some of these, this document was made in conversation with the provincial and federal government. So this was approved through both levels of our government to ensure that all international students comply by these requirements. This pledge of compliance is literally a pledge that you have to commit to adhering to before you come into the country, and you're going to have to show this to the border officer as well. Basically, the main information, there's these check boxes. There's a penalty for people who don't adhere to the Quarantine Act. So if you come into the country and say you're going to quarantine for 14 days, you have to. This means you can't leave to get food. It means you can't, hang out with roommates. It means you can't have company over. It means you have to have a plan to be basically self-isolated for 2 weeks. If you fail to do this, the penalties can range up to 6 months in prison and or $750,000 in fines. It's a big deal. It's meant to deter people from breaking their quarantine, and I would hate to see anyone get in trouble. So please make a plan and stick to it. If you need help while you're in quarantine, if you have some issues, Trent staff will be checking in with you daily and making sure that you're okay, and we can help out as best we can. There may be implications to your academic and enrollment status as well if you fail to comply with quarantine. If you fail to comply with quarantine and get deported, that will impact your ability to take classes in Canada, and that would be your responsibility. You'd still be responsible for your for your financial and your academic obligations. You pledge to comply with the requirements stated in this document. You confirm that you'll print a quarantine plan for presentation at the port of entry, and you'll register the quarantine plan through the ArriveCan app, as I mentioned earlier, prior to getting on the flight. You'll confirm that you have appropriate medical insurance effective of the date of your arrival in Canada, which includes coverage for COVID-19 during the quarantine period. For most of you, this coverage will be through the University Health Insurance Plan, UHIP, and that's great. For any of you who are coming earlier, like basically more than a month before the start of the term, in November essentially, you're going to have private supplemental insurance for that first month, and we'll explain more about that later. Upon the completion of your 14-day quarantine, you're required by the government to complete a COVID-19 test. There's locations in Peterborough, and it's covered by your health insurance, so there'll be no cost, and we'll be explaining how to get this test for those of you who are quarantining. And you have to commit that should you get a positive COVID-19 test, you're going to have to let Trent University Health Services know so that we can be diligent and make sure that the campus community is safe. I should note that there's a COVID-19 test that's positive doesn't impact your immigration status, and it won't impact your academic status. We just want to make sure that you and everyone else are as safe as possible and are getting the medical care that you need. Once you complete this, we're going to upload this document into our quarantine plan registry. This longer text here basically talks about what I was saying earlier, that the travel restrictions require you to self-isolate, and Trent University is prioritizing the safety of all of our students by making sure that you adhere to this plan. There's a bit of repetition, but it's really important that that we all understand that your requirements are clear. So making the plan requires a bit of work on your part, and we're happy that we can provide you with a bit of a guide how to do this. So before you make your plan, take a few minutes and read the Government of Canada's guidelines on, or information on, what the coronavirus is. I know every country is trying their best to prevent the spread, but since you're coming to Canada, it's really helpful to understand how the Canadian government is understanding it and what their recommendations are for keeping yourself and others safe. So take a few minutes and read that. Similarly, take a few minutes to learn about the federal quarantine requirements and other guidelines as issued by the government. The link is here in the blue. And if you're coming to Canada, planning your quarantine, we tried to break it down into three options. So as I said before, your plan is your responsibility. You can do what makes sense for you, for your life, for your network in Canada, and for your budget. But basically, there's three options for quarantining in Canada when you get here. For some of you, it may involve quarantining in Trent's on-campus housing. This is coordinated in conjunction with our housing and residence department. They need to know that you're coming, and this plan needs to be made before you come. This option only exists for those of you who are arriving before December 6th or after January 2nd. The reason being is that in Canada, and at Trent especially, the period from December 7th to January 1st is it's largely a holiday period. It's the exam period and when our Christmas and New Year's holiday is. So the housing office isn't able to take new students during that time. The good news is that we have an arrangement with a hotel right beside the Toronto airport. We'll give more details on that later in this document. But for those of you who aren't quarantining on campus, can quarantine in the airport Holiday Inn in a really nice room, comfortable bed, nice TV, good Wi-Fi, your own washroom, all of the good things. And they have an option that will provide you with 3 meals a day and the accommodation for a very reasonable rate, like much more inexpensive than typically staying in a hotel and eating restaurant food. And they can accommodate different dietary restrictions as well. So personally, I think that the second option might be the best for most people. It's right beside the airport. There's an airport shuttle that will deliver you from the arrivals gate to the hotel. And you'll be able to quarantine in relative comfort, and we'll be checking in virtually anyways. So we'll be chatting with you the same as if you were in Peterborough or Durham. And then the last option, C, is for a private quarantine arrangement. So some of you have family or friends already in Canada. You may have an apartment already arranged. That's totally fine. If you have your own arrangements, this is great as long as the university knows and as long as your quarantine plan explains how you're going to keep your roommates or your family members safe, and you have to isolate from them in your own room during the time you're there. So those are your 3 quarantine options. You also have to plan to have transportation arranged from the airport to your quarantine destination. You can't just get on the Toronto subway. You have to have a private transportation to get you where you're going. The airport hotel, as I mentioned, has private shuttles which will pick you up at the door. Details on how to procure that are going to be given to you once you book your airport hotel. If you're coming to Peterborough or Durham, you're going to have to book a private shuttle with a company that will put you in a socially distanced vehicle. You have to wear a mask, make sure that you are isolated from the driver, and they'll deliver you and your luggage to wherever you're living. If you have family or friends who can pick you up at the airport, that's a valid option as well. Please be mindful of keeping your distance, sitting in the back seat away from the driver, and avoiding the tendency to want to give someone a welcome hug or anything when you first see them at the airport. You're going to have to keep your 6 feet apart for the 2 weeks when you're in quarantine. Register your trip in our registry, as I mentioned several times. It's really important that we know what's going on so we can help you. If we don't know, we can't read your minds. Complete the compliance pledge I mentioned. And then once you submit your quarantine plan, we're going to keep you up to date with any changes that may impact it between the time that you submit it and when your arrival will be. We have included a list of essential items to plan when you're packing to keep you, able to self-monitor for COVID-19 and also to keep you self-sufficient while you're in your residence for the 14 days. Here are links to downloading the ArriveCan app for Apple or Android devices. It's really simple. You can do that now, even if you don't have your travel plans quite yet. You can get the app downloaded so that you're ready to go. And number 9, same as I said before, make sure you don't have COVID-19 symptoms before you plan to travel. The Government of Canada is going to keep a record of your travel plans, as I said, through the ArriveCan app. They're also going to want a contact number to reach you. They can do it through the app. They can do it through like a VPN type phone number. But basically, during your quarantine, you may get phone calls from either of these 2 numbers. Answer them if they call, because that is the government just checking in. They're never going to ask you for your personal information. They're never going to ask for banking information or for money or anything. So it's not a scam. This is a legitimate check-in to make sure that you're in quarantine and that you're doing well. And then number 12, the harsh reality of traveling during a pandemic is that, sometimes the plans go off script. It's important to have a backup plan. You need to have some access to cash, whether it's literally cash money or whether it's a credit card, because if a student's turned away at the border, there's an expectation that you're going to have to probably book a hotel stay and then book a flight home. I hope this doesn't happen to any of you, but if you don't have a good plan, it will happen. And I've talked with border officers during the pandemic, and they're very serious about enforcing these quarantine and COVID-19 safety arrival rules. So make sure that your plan is clear. And if you have doubts, check with us. And if you don't think that your plan is solid, maybe plan to come at a later time. So, hopefully it doesn't happen, but if it happens, Trent can't talk you out of the situation if the border is going to send you back. They have the discretion to do that, and it's an option that you need to be aware of. In terms of quarantining, the main thing you need to know is that you have to have a space to isolate yourself from others, your own room basically with a closed door. You also have to have access to the essential services that you need: food, medicine, furniture, obviously, medical care if you need it. And it's really important that if you have roommates or family members who are living near you, that they're not the vulnerable population. So not people over 65 years of age, or not people with underlying medical conditions which compromise their immune system. So if it's friends around your own age, that other university students, if it's healthy family members, that's cool. That's no problem. This part of the protocol goes into greater detail about our 3 options for quarantining. Option 1 for living in Trent's residences. Basically, our housing services is a large department that administers all of our on-campus housing options. They need to talk with you about what your plan is, because they're the ones who are going to be assigning you the room and making sure that you have the services you need, including food and support, while you're in residence. So if you want to consider this option before December 6th or after January 3rd, make sure you email residents@trentu.ca and you can discuss the options that they have. There's a cost to this option. There's a cost for an airport hotel as well. I understand that it costs a lot of money to study, and I empathize with that. But I also want to remind everyone that we're living in the midst of a pandemic, and it's a challenging time for everyone. To have food service delivered to your room and put into a quarantined, isolated wing, there will be a cost, and the housing services can explain that to you when you contact them. The airport hotel option, it's available at all dates, essentially. So from today through till well into the next term. The Holiday Inn Toronto Airport East is the hotel that we've made an arrangement with. Their price is the best, the facilities are great, and they're working very closely with us to be partners in providing you a good option for quarantining at a hotel. The rate is $65 per room per night plus taxes for a single occupancy room. If you want to have that booked with 3 meals a day, which I recommend because given that you're in quarantine, it's much easier just to have your meals delivered. It's $110 per room per night plus taxes, including a shuttle from the airport. There'll be full details at the end of this document, which you can refer to on your own after we're done this session. And then private quarantine arrangements probably require the most thinking on your part because you have to explain how you're going to, keep everyone safe, including yourself. Any dates, obviously. You can quarantine at off-campus accommodation as long as you can keep yourself distanced from others, and you have a plan to access your basic necessities. If you have a roommate or a family member who will bring you food, that's totally fine, but you need to be aware that you're not going to be able to share the kitchen to cook with them or cook on your own anyways, because you need to be spending the 2 weeks in your room in security. You can obviously leave to use the washroom, and just be sure that you and your roommates have a plan and an agreement to keep things sanitized, and also to, you have 2 washrooms, maybe dedicate one for you while you're in quarantine and they can use the other one. This is basically reiterating the requirement to self-isolate, and if you're moving into to an apartment, for example, or a different hotel than the one that we've arranged, we strongly encourage you to pre-arrange contactless move-in. So like give a heads up to your landlord that you're coming and that maybe they can, I don't know, whatever, leave the keys in a mailbox or a concealed spot, or meet you on the time that you arrive and just do a contactless transfer of the keys. And then it's really important just to communicate with anyone you're going to be living with in advance so that you all are on the same page about the plan and that you have their consent for living in quarantine in the same house as them. They're going to ask how you're going to keep each other safe when you get to the border, so having this plan is key. And then if you have any questions about it, or you can't, one of these arrangements won't work for you, email international@trentu.ca and we'll see what we can do to help you. These are essentially the 3 options that we have, but we'll help you think through anything that you don't understand. We have a detailed packing checklist. I'm not going to go through it all right now. The main thing I want to note in here is that, obviously bring your computer. You're going to need to get online during this time. Bring your medication that you need if you have any medical conditions that pre-exist or, that pre-exist your travel. It's really important that you have enough to get you through at least the 2 weeks of when you're in quarantine. Your clothes, your personal hygiene products, and some things for your own comfort so that you feel connected and secure. We know it's a challenging time to be isolated for 2 weeks, and we're going to do our best to stay in touch with some check-ins and some fun activities, but you're largely going to be occupying yourself, so having a laptop will be useful. When you travel, make sure you bring at least 2 masks. If you're staying in residence or if you're staying at the airport or hotel, we'll give you some other masks upon arrival. Bring a travel-sized bottle of hand sanitizer, 100 milliliters. Don't bring a giant one. They won't let you take it on the plane, but bring a small one. That'll be fine. And then all of your documents that are listed here. While traveling on the plane and in the shuttle to your accommodation, you have to wear a mask, practice physical distancing, wash your hands frequently and use hand sanitizer, sanitize the personal space and high-touch areas. This should be common practice for all of us by now. We've been doing this pandemic for long enough. Minimize your trips to the washroom, touch as few surfaces as possible. And this last one's a good reminder for all of us, keep your cell phone charged because, while in transit or, you may not have access to a charger all the time. So having battery in your phone is going to be essential to accessing the app and making any calls you need to make upon arrival. If you're going to be traveling from the airport to a private accommodation that's not the airport hotel, we have two organizations or 2 companies in Peterborough called Century Transportation and Benson Services, and they have private shuttles that will take you from the airport to wherever you're living. It's important to contact them. We recommend a week before departure. a minimum of 48 hours, anything less than that, and they can't guarantee they'll pick you up. But as soon as you have your flight booked, you should contact one of them and book a shuttle. And they will, they'll explain the cost, and they'll deliver you where you need to go when you need to go. There's some information on what happens if you have COVID-19 symptoms and how you'd access some healthcare in Ontario once you get here. There's a phone number that's 1866, a free number called Telehealth Ontario, and this would put you in contact with like usually a nurse or a nurse practitioner, and they'll triage your symptoms and let you know whether you should proceed to a hospital or whether you should continue to self-isolate or go for testing. That's your first line of checking in if you're feeling mild symptoms. In Canada, if you are severely sick, the number that we call is 911. And if you're seriously concerned about your health or well-being, 911 will get you in touch with a dispatcher, and they'll send an ambulance to wherever you are and make sure that you get the emergency care that you need. It goes into great detail about how you function in your quarantine. It talks about how you access your mandatory COVID-19 test after your quarantine, whether you're in Durham, Peterborough, or elsewhere in Ontario, and some good practice about how to get to the testing site to get your test safely. So additional resources, tells you how to connect to the Wi-Fi at the airport. Also tells you how to connect to the Wi-Fi in residence. If you're living in a private accommodation with roommates, make sure that you message with them and they teach you how to get online. If you're living in a private accommodation, like without any roommates, you're not going to have Wi-Fi waiting for you when you get in there unless your landlord has already prearranged that. So make sure that you maybe have data on your phone if that's the case, because you're going to need to get in touch during that time you're in quarantine. There is an option to buy a prepaid Canadian SIM card at the airport, depending when you arrive. If you arrive between 10 and 10, and it's in Terminal 1 at the International Arrivals Gate. So that's an option. You could buy a prepaid card and use it for the 2 weeks you're in quarantine, and then you could get a better phone plan once you're able to go and actually purchase one on your own. So that's a lot of information. Here's details about the Holiday Inn, and then we have a bit more information about UHIP, which we're going to talk about at a later slide. So Jessica, did I miss anything important about that, or is that pretty thorough?
No, it was great.
Cool. Okay. And we'll go back to your screen.
Yeah, I was just going to go through some of the questions as you were going through this that maybe we could answer live.
Okie dokie.
A lot of folks are wondering if it's possible for them to quarantine with a co-arriving member, whether it be family member or not, a friend. And the short answer is yes, you can. But of course, the same regulations apply. Someone else was asking if they can quarantine in a shared housing with roommates that they've never met before.
They can, but the key thing is that you have communication with them prior to your arrival, so that you're all on the same page about it having a plan. Basically, if you have a room that you can isolate in, and they agree that they're gonna let you do your own thing in your room, and that as I said, if you have 2 washrooms, maybe we can dedicate one to you and one for them, then that's fine, as long as the plan is clear how you're not going to be interacting and hanging out in the living room or sharing the kitchen together during that time.
Great. And someone else is asking how many people can share a quarantine place and how many people can share a room. And I guess this answer depends on which place of quarantine option you select. In housing, you cannot share a space. So folks that are quarantining in housing will self-isolate in their own room. If you select the affiliated hotel package that we have, which is the Holiday Inn Toronto Airport East, you can have up to 2 people in the quarantine room. And I guess if you're staying off campus, if you folks are living in a shared space and want to have a shared room and you're arriving together, that's okay as well. I don't know if there's a maximum, Paul.
I don't think there's a defined maximum. I think it's essentially you should be isolated in your own room unless you're arriving with somebody who's already within your circle of exposure.
Great. Sorry, I'm just reading through some of these.
Lots of good questions. So someone was asking about this laptop thing. So you don't have to bring your laptop if you don't have one that's good, or you don't have one at all. I mean, you could actually order a laptop online during your quarantine, and it would show up within a couple days to your wherever you're living. You know, Amazon or Best Buy or any of the main companies. That's a fine option. You're not going to be able to go out and like try them all out, but you can order them online during your quarantine. That's no problem. Make sure you have a phone at least so that you can stay in communication with us and with your loved ones while you're there.
And just for some costs as well, folks were asking, what's the cost to quarantine in the hotel versus residence? Residents, if you're arriving prior to December 6th, the cost is about $150 per day. For the Toronto Airport East, Holiday Inn Airport East, it is $110 per day with 3 meals. However, the cost can be reduced based on how many meals you select per day as well. And all of the information for that can be found on within the Safe Arrival Protocol. I think it's actually on page 13. So if you just scroll through, you can find the hotel package as well.
Somebody was, sorry, Jess.
Sorry, I was just going to say for if you're staying on residence, it's also 3 meals per day. So.
Somebody was asking about the option to use Airbnb instead of one of the options we mentioned. You can use Airbnb. Airbnb would count as the third option, basically a private accommodation. You can do that. Once you book an Airbnb, you'll be sent a confirmation with all of the details of the dates and the location. And that is what can be included in your quarantine plan for Trent and for the government. Obviously, an Airbnb isn't going to give you 3 meals a day, so you would have to explain how you're going to order your food to be delivered to you from, you know, Takeout Food or Skip the Dishes or one of these companies that will bring you food. But that's fine. Same deal if you're staying with relatives, you know, including their address and how you're going to stay isolated from them in your own room is perfectly fine. These are good questions.
Are there any others before we move on to the quarantine plan, Paul?
Yeah, there was one good question that someone asked about if all of their winter term courses are online, are they still going to be able to enter Canada if they want to? And the good news is yes, you can now. So it doesn't matter whether your courses are online or in person or a mixed. If you have a valid study permit, you're welcome to come to Canada as long as you follow all these rules we're talking about.
Great. So the next part I'm going to talk a little bit about is your actual quarantine plan. So just the first note here is mentioning that the quarantine plan is your responsibility and it's a requirement of the Government of Canada. So it's not optional. If you don't have a quarantine plan and you arrive at the point of entry in Canada, you will be turned away. So as we've mentioned many times throughout this webinar, as part of the Quarantine Act, travelers to Canada are required to self-isolate for 14 days. Arriving in Canada, when you arrive in Canada, you also have to provide your contact information to the Government of Canada, and they will do compliance checks. And you will be responsible for monitoring yourself for symptoms and submitting any symptoms to the ArriveCan app throughout the 14-day quarantine. So, what should your quarantine plan include? So it should include information about your suitable place of quarantine, It should include information on your direct mode of transportation from the airport to your place of quarantine. So whether that's a shuttle or you have a private taxi picking you up, or you have family members picking you up or friends, you should just provide some information about that. You should also provide information on how you plan to access basic necessities, whether that's food or medication, and services. So, if you have children, that may be childcare or cleaning supplies, or pet care, without leaving your place of quarantine. So, if you're living in residence, or if you're quarantining in residence, or if you're quarantining with a hotel, it's fairly simple to outline how you'll access a lot of these services, because they'll be provided through that quarantine package. But you'll have to do a little bit more work to figure out your plan if you are quarantining off campus or privately. So as I mentioned before, we do have a quarantine supplement and template for you. So that can help guide you in making this plan and making a plan that's suitable. So what I'm going to do quickly now is just open that and share it with you. Oops. Okay. So this is the quarantine supplement, or the quarantine plan supplement. So this will guide you through thinking through the different steps that you need to make your own quarantine plan. So it just explains that, what is a suitable place of quarantine? A suitable place of quarantine, of course, can be private, or it can be on campus. It can be in a hotel. If you are quarantining with other people, you need to make sure that you have your own space to self-isolate, but also that you're not sharing, you're not in contact with vulnerable people. So people who are 65 years or older, or with underlying medical conditions. And yeah, you should avoid public spaces if you are sharing a place of quarantine. And then in terms of transportation from the airport to your place of quarantine, it just mentions here that you should book or arrange your transportation from the airport to your place of quarantine prior to arrival in Canada, or prior to departure. So and also just making sure that you're providing, whether it's a family member that's picking you up or a shuttle, just make sure that you're providing your flight information, because flights are often delayed in this time as well during the pandemic. There's also some information on how you can access basic necessities and essential services. So we've offered some information on different takeout services or grocery delivery. It is possible to get your groceries delivered via a company called Instacart. And then there's takeout options with Uber Eats or DoorDash or Skip the Dishes. If you need any prescriptions delivered, Shoppers Drug Mart also delivers that. And also, just another note is making sure that your place of quarantine is furnished prior to arrival, because the last thing you want to do is arrive and have to quarantine for 14 days and not have, the essentials of a bed and all the things that you need to, to quarantine for those 14 days. You'll also need to provide a plan to access medical care. And basically we've just provided some best practices. So for instance, if you are feeling sick during quarantine, you are going to call, a national hotline, basically a COVID hotline, and talk to someone, and they can guide you on what your next steps are. So for instance, if they ask you to go get a a COVID-19 test, or if you're sick with something else and you need to go to the hospital or to a doctor, the health professional will indicate that to you. And then you need a plan to how you can get there safely, because you'll have to leave quarantine. So we've provided some best practices here, including wearing a mask, sitting in the back seat on the passenger side. So for instance, if you're taking a taxi or if a family member or friend is picking you up, using hand sanitizer, sanitizing high touch areas, touch as few surfaces as possible. So you'll have to include some of this information in your quarantine plan. You can copy these best practices and just insert it in the plan. And then this is a template to help you prepare for the Trent University Quarantine Registry. So just the information that you will be required to include in your plan is your personal information, your travel information, your quarantine, your transportation information, your place of quarantine, describe how you will self-isolate from others, if applicable. And then you'll have to write here how you will access food and essential services, how you will access medical care, any additional information, and then sign and date. So this is a template, but you can actually input all of this information directly in the Trent University Quarantine Registry, which I will show right now. Okay, sorry, it wasn't letting me share my other screen. So this is what the Trent University Quarantine Plan Registry looks like. It's just a form, and Paul showed this to you, or some of this information to you already in the Trent Safe Arrival Protocol. So the Safe Arrival Protocol is included in the registry, so you'll have to, it's just prompting you to make sure that you download it and read and understand everything that you need to know for the Safe Arrival Protocol, and then confirm that you've downloaded and read it. You'll include your personal information. You will sign the Pledge of Compliance that you did see in the Trent Safe Arrival Protocol here. So you don't need to sign it in the Safe Arrival Protocol. You can sign it right here and it populates the date for you. And then on the next page is your quarantine plan. So you will submit, you can download the supplement and template here if you need to. And then some of these are just simple yes or no's. So I've confirmed, I've checked that I don't have symptoms of COVID-19, right? So you can just give a simple yes or no. Then you'll input all of your information. Indicate your transport to the facility. Again, some yes or no's in terms of the place of quarantine. You'll have to input the quarantine address. So make sure you know that information. Describing how you will self-isolate. Confirming that you have health insurance. So in the next coming slides, I'm also going to quickly go over health insurance. Yeah, and then there's space for additional information, and then just confirming that everything in your plan is true and that you'll follow the plan. And then you have to sign. And then the important note of all of this, so you're submitting your quarantine plan to Trent International, and we will check it to verify that everything is good to go. And at the end of the survey, you have the option to download this as a PDF. So you're going to want to do that because you don't want to have to write your plan out twice. So you can download as a PDF, and this is what you will print out and present to the border agent. So that's your full plan. So you'll have a plan, we'll have a plan, and then you'll present the plan to the border agent when you arrive in Canada. Okay.
All right. Somebody was asking after they print it, do they sign it? Why not? Once you have a physical copy, it doesn't hurt. You have an electronic signature.
Sure, yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, you will be signing it within the registry itself, but I mean, it doesn't hurt to sign it. Okay. So, sorry, it's not letting me toggle, but so now we've talked about the Trent Safe Arrival Protocol, you've made a quarantine plan, you've submitted it to the Trent University Quarantine Plan Registry. And the last thing that you need to do is you need to submit your plan through the ArriveCan app. So this is an application that you can download prior to departure, and you can submit all of your information within 48 hours prior to arriving in Canada. And, basically this app helps you to provide the mandatory information you need to provide to the government of Canada. It will also help you reduce your wait times at the point of entry. And it helps you to provide the government of Canada with voluntary updates on your quarantine compliance and the development of any symptoms during the 14-day period. So you can download this app on iOS, Android, or there's also a web format. So you can check that out and you can download the app and kind of look through it prior to arrival, and then make sure you submit your plan 48 hours prior to arriving in Canada. So the next piece is health insurance. So a little bit about the university health insurance plan. So all international students residing in Ontario are required to have health insurance that begins the first day of their arrival. So Trent International administers the university health insurance plan. And this plan covers doctors' service, hospital service, diagnostic testing. And it's mandatory, as I mentioned, for all students that are living in Ontario. It does not replace travel insurance from the time that you're flying to Canada. And, also, COVID-19 testing and treatment is covered. I know some folks in the chat box were asking about this. So the earliest date that students can enroll in UHIP is December 10th, 2020. If you're arriving prior to this, you will need to get supplemental coverage. But if you're arriving December 10th and onward, yes, your COVID testing and treatment is covered. And yeah, the other point is that if you will be out of Ontario for the winter term, so if you are in another province in Canada, or if you are outside of Canada altogether, you can opt out of this plan. So you will need to send an email to uhip@trentu.ca if you're interested in opting out, or if you have any other questions about the plan in general, you can send an email to uhip@trentu.ca. I see some questions coming in. Are they about?
We had a good question about just when to submit the quarantine plan if they're planning on coming in the summer. And I would say wait till closer till your travel date, because a lot of things can change between now and then. So don't worry about submitting a quarantine plan right now if you're not coming until April.
Totally. Yes, and hopefully I've already answered this one. If we're not flying in January, do we still need to pay for UHIP? No, you can opt out. So make sure you send an email to uhip@trentu.ca if you're looking for more information on how to opt out. In addition to this health insurance, you will have supplemental coverage. I didn't include a slide on this today, but we do have a supplemental plan as well that is called Student VIP, and it covers prescriptions and dental care. So, closer to the time of your arrival, we will provide some more information on that supplemental insurance coverage as well. The last date to opt out of UHIP is, I believe it's January 10th, but I would recommend sending an email to uhip@trentu.ca and they can provide you with some more information on that.
Someone had a good question about what happens if they get here maybe in early January and classes start while they're in quarantine, and what do they do about assignments where they have to be there in person? Well, I mean, most of your classes will be online, so that's easy to do from quarantine. If you have a class that's in person, I mean, what I suggest is the same thing I would suggest anytime that extenuating circumstances happen, is that you email your professor and you explain the circumstance and ask them if there's any accommodation that can be made. If you do this before instead of after the fact, it usually works out better. And I assure you that our professors at Trent are, they're reasonable people and they understand how challenging it is right now for everyone, especially people in your circumstance of traveling and quarantining. So just communicate and explain that, you're required to be in quarantine. And I bet that in almost all circumstances, there can be some sort of reasonable accommodation given. Does anyone have any other questions? There's a lot of good ones.
Sorry, I'm reading through some of the questions.
There's a lot of uncertainty about when the visa application centers open and what their plans are. I mean, it's an uncertainty that we can't really fix right now because we don't know when they're going to open. What I can tell you is that if all you're waiting for is your biometrics to be given, the time from when your biometrics are submitted to when you're approved should be very quick. Hopefully it's within a couple weeks because everything else has already been approved. So, I mean, I guess if you give your biometrics in early or mid-December, it's still possible that you would get your study permit before January.
So we'll still have some space for questions at the end. So Paul, can I move on to some transition?
Yeah, we've probably got another, 15 minutes or so we can go on this?
Sure. Yeah, so part of my role at Trent International is to provide transition support to new international students. So I, myself and a team of student staff organize orientation. So we are doing some pre-arrival orientation throughout the month of November and December. And I would like to invite you all to those orientation sessions. These sessions are intended for international students, so the information you will learn is directed to your specific needs. And it's supplemental to the university-wide winter orientation. So there will also be a winter orientation held between January 3rd to 5th. So our sessions are hosted weekly from now until about mid-December. And we'll have social, academic, and transition sessions. Check your Trent email for the invite. I'll send out another invite today for anyone that was newly admitted. And our first session is a social meetup. It's this Friday and it's called Global Greets from 10:30 to 11:30 a.m. EST. If anyone is here that didn't get this email, you can feel free to email me directly at Jevans, Jevans, @trentu.ca, and we can forward you the information. And as I mentioned, there will also be a winter orientation for new students in January. So it's from January 3rd to 5th. It's your introduction to Trent University. So we will go over various topics, including how to use the Blackboard Learn system, which is where all of your courses will live and all of the information for your courses will live. We'll have information on planning your degree and how to access the various resources that we have available to you on campus. And there will also be lots of opportunities to meet other students and other new students. And this year, our orientation will be mostly online. There will be a few sessions in person mid-January for folks after their quarantine that can get involved socially. So again, if anyone has any questions about orientation or the pre-arrival orientation, please feel free to send me an email and I'm happy to answer any questions that you might have. And then as always, we do have our virtual front desk available to everyone. So if you have a question, if you're struggling to register for your courses and you need some guidance, if you want to book an appointment with someone like Paul for immigration questions or one of our academic advisors, we can help you with that. So we are available Monday to Friday, 10 a.m. to 4 p.m. EST. And if you want to find the information and the link to the virtual front desk, you can find more information on our website, which is trentu.ca/current students/international. And then we do have various social media accounts. It's the best way to know what events we're hosting. So you can follow us on Instagram and Facebook at Trent U International. Make sure you have that U in there for university. And we also have a Facebook group for you to connect with others and to connect with some of our staff at Trent International. So you can search for the Trent University International Class of 2025. And of course, you can always send us an email at international@trentu.ca. And so I know we have about 12 more minutes here. I know that folks have lots of questions, so maybe Paul and I can go through some of the various questions that you have. Yes, there is an official group for graduate students. So it is called, let me check really quickly.
While you're looking that up,
Yeah.
I'll answer the question about how do you get a receipt for the payment of your first year tuition fees? Because immigration often asks for that. You can get proof of payment if you've already paid your fees through your MyTrent portal in the finances tab, which is in the top right corner, and there should be a link for student account or account summary or something like that, and it'll show you an itemized record of all payments and everything to your student account. That will be sufficient. You can download a PDF and submit it. Regarding UHIP, you don't have to make a payment for it prior to arrival. It will be added into your fees that will be billed to your account at the start of the term. So there's no need to worry about that. It'll automatically be enrolled and billed.
And in terms of the official Facebook groups, the graduate students group is called Trent International Graduate Students Official Group.
That's an easy one.
Yeah.
Someone was asking about how they get a tuition refund if a decision about their study permit application is made after the refund deadline, and I guess if they're rejected for the study permit. Well, as the person noted in the question, there is a financial deadline every term for when you can get a refund. If you're registered in courses and you remain registered in courses after the financial refund date, unfortunately, you're going to be responsible for paying for those courses regardless whether you get a study permit or not. So be mindful of that. Be mindful of that financial date. Look it up in the academic calendar, and that will be probably your big decision about whether or not you decide to drop those courses or not. Past the refund date, obviously your seat is still, or your virtual seat is still booked in the classroom, and there's still all of the corresponding costs of having a student in a class. Someone was asking if you could repeat the name of the group for the graduate students.
Yes, it's Trent International Graduate Students Official Group, and I'm just typing it up here for you.
Nice. Someone was asking about whether they can start their study in Canada for winter online with an approval in principle visa, which is like the stage 2 study permit approval that some of you might have. Um, you can start your studies online with that, but you can't come to Canada until you're actually fully approved for your study permit. So if you have approval in principle, you can study online from home. Once it gets fully approved, once you give your biometrics, you'll be able to come to Canada if you want.
And yes, if you defer your admission, you'll be opted out of UHIP. Well, basically your tuition will be deferred and your fees will be deferred.
Yep, that's no problem. Yeah, I understand the stress many of you are feeling about processing times and whether you're going to get things approved in time. It's a challenge now with the pandemic. I know that the government of Canada is prioritizing getting study permits approved, and hopefully all of you will have a decision, in sufficient time to get here. Can the study permit be approved in December if you're applying now? Well, I mean, as I said at the start, it's getting really close. So get your application in, and depending where you are in the world, depending on how busy the offices are, whether they're open, I would say that it's possible, but with every day that gets by, it's increasingly unlikely to get approved in time for January. So, usually I would suggest that students get their applications in at least 3 months before they hope to start their studies. We're definitely in less time than that now. So get the application in. And someone had a good question about if the courses are going to start online in January and they don't get a visa till then, how would the postgrad work permit work in that case? So in order to have the time that you're studying count towards your post-graduation work permit, you need to have a study permit, basically, because that's how they know you're a student, and that's how they count you as a student when they're assessing your eligibility. So basically, if you've got a study permit and you start online, no problem. Oh, and somebody asked a good question about traveling with a spouse. So yeah, right now, if you meet all of the eligibility requirements, you can also travel with your spouse, with your husband or your wife, and even your children, as long as they also have a quarantine plan. That particular plan doesn't have to be submitted to Trent specifically, but you still have to do everything else that you have to do to get them here. A spouse who's traveling with someone with a valid study permit doesn't need a job offer because they'll have an open work permit. As long as they've got a visa and a passport, they can travel with you and look for work once they're here. So that's great. Just make sure they've got all of their documentation in line. Somebody's asking for clarity about whether they can start classes in January. So for those of you who've already applied for a study permit, like in the summer or in the early fall, you have probably received what's called stage 1 or stage 2 approval in principle. If you have that, you can study online, that's fine, from home, no worries. If you applied recently for a study permit and you don't have any stage 1 or stage 2 approval because they stopped doing that, you shouldn't study online from anywhere until your study permit is approved, because you need to have a study permit to study now. You can apply for your study permit and your visa with your conditional admission letter, that's fine. You should do that with your conditional admission offer now, because time is ticking, and that's no problem. Most people apply with a conditional offer because it's just the time in the cycle when they get their offer.
Sorry, someone was asking about UHIP. How do you enroll in UHIP? Any student that's registered in courses will be automatically enrolled in UHIP, and then it will be your responsibility to opt out if you're out of Ontario.
Someone was following up and saying that the border said that their spouse needs a job offer to come to Canada. If they're accompanying you, that's not actually the case right now. I mean, the border officer has a discretion to say yes or no, but no, the policy that says that if someone has a valid study permit, their family members can come with them as accompanying guests. So I'm going to actually look up the policy and post it on this group in a second. These are all great questions. I'm glad that you're thinking of all this stuff. Someone wanted to know about approval in principle and studying classes online. Yes, they'll count for your postgrad work permit if you have approval in principle. Can I study from another city rather than staying in Peterborough? Short answer is if your classes are online, it doesn't matter what city you're in. That's fine. People are asking for my email. Well, that's fine. I'm happy to share that with you.
Also, folks are asking how to make a payment. If you go to Google and search Trent University make a payment or making a payment, you will find all of the different options to make a payment. So whether you're studying in person or, most folks aren't studying in person, but whether you're studying online or not, there are the same methods of payment. So I will also send a link here in the chat box for anyone that wants that information.
So somebody was asking about having applied recently without stage 1 approval, and they're applying, they must be probably, well, in one of the countries that have the student direct stream, the SDS option for approving, and that's an expedited process. So if you've submitted all of the documents that are required for SDS, they should make a decision with it definitely within a month, and they're still doing it. So I mean, I think that you should be good to get a decision made before our January classes. Obviously, you'll just have to see what unfolds in the next few weeks if your application is in. I'm just pulling up the information on traveling with a spouse. So it says your immediate family member may come to you with Canada basically, I'm going to post the link, and this is for the person who is having questions about bringing their spouse. Obviously, the right now, non-essential travel is prohibited, but if you can illustrate that you're a family and that you're codependent and your spouse will be living with you and you like making your life in Canada for the time that you're an international student, that would constitute essential travel at this point. That said, your spouse could also remain at home and then join you when once the border opens further.
Just to clarify with the university health insurance plan, it is mandatory if you are in Ontario. So you can't opt out if you're in Ontario. It's mandatory for all international students in Ontario, but you can opt out. And I'm going to type the email below, which is uhip@trentu.ca. So if you'd like to opt out, include your full name, your student number, and just express that you would like to opt out of the university health insurance plan because you will be out of Ontario for the winter term.
Somebody was asking about when they could let the university know about deferment. Well, I guess the short answer is before classes start in January would be great. So
yeah, so folks are, I guess Paul already answered this. So there's a few questions again about where folks can quarantine. You can quarantine anywhere and then make your way back to Durham or Peterborough or wherever you plan to live.
Yep. Somebody had a question about a social insurance number, an SIN, and that's a document that will allow you to work once you get to Canada. So the government doesn't issue your social insurance numbers when you're in your home country. You'll get that once you get to Canada. It's possible that it'll be issued at the Toronto airport, but realistically, probably not right now. So if that's the case, once you get to Canada during your quarantine, you can apply for a social insurance number online. And they'll need your study permit number and your passport number, and they'll approve it very quickly. You'll get a decision within usually a week. So you'll do the application online now. Just Google apply for a SIN from within Canada. What do you need to start online? Well, you either need approval in principle for a study permit, or you need a full study permit, basically, as I said. Any specific date to arrive in January for winter term? Well, the move-in day is what, January 3rd this year? Is that true? I think if you're living in residence?
Yep. It's from 9 to 4 on January 3rd, which is a Sunday.
So if you come early and do your quarantine, you could arrive on campus with all of the other students who are living in residence on January 3rd. If you're not living in residence, I mean, technically you could arrive whatever makes sense for you according to your lease, wherever you're living. If you're studying fully online and you don't have any in-person classes, I mean, technically, I guess you could travel at any point that you want, as long as you catch up on any of the classes that you miss while you're in transit. Excellent questions. I feel like we've been talking for a long time, and there's a lot of information that we've left you to think about. I hope you've all received the email that we were going through so thoroughly today. We're going to, if some of you were registered as students maybe later than when we pulled the list, you'll be sent the email on our list that we send out this week again. So stay tuned for that. And please, as you know as your plan, fill out the forms, submit your quarantine plan with us, and we'll look forward to meeting you.
Great. Thank you so much, everyone. Again, you can, any of the questions that are remaining, you can feel free to send us an email at international@trentu.ca, or you can email myself or Paul. And I didn't put my email in here, but let me do that quickly before we go today. And I'm excited to meet everyone at orientation. I will send out another communication today just to invite everyone to our first event happening this Friday. So lovely meeting you, everyone, and send us your emails if you have any more questions.
Stay well. Bye, everyone.